cause is free. No fee, no fuss, but a buck on Patreon would be less us. Keeps the gears turning, the tea in the cup, and stops me from giving this whole thing up.
Hello, lovelies. Right, housekeeping. Please continue to give feedback on the new videos. I am testing out a whole bunch of stuff, most of it suggested by you. So if you think something's a success and you'd like to see more of it, please leave comments about that. It does mean the channel's going to be a bit scattershot for a while, and you won't see any follow-ups or additional ones in a series for any of these for a while, because there's a lot of other stuff to go through. But yeah, feedback, please. On progress on running, the main book is essentially finished and edited. The second book, which is the Monsters and Magic book, I have finished the K's in the yokai. Japan has a lot of yokai and monsters that begin with a K. So yeah, that took a long time. But I'm already on M now, so that gives you some idea of progress. And my good friend Ed did a whole bunch of research on historical Japanese magic and curses and stuff for me, which will make things a lot easier for me when it comes to the magic section. So yeah, there's that to look forward to. I am struggling a bit mentally at the moment, trying to keep going, you know, one foot in front of the other, and struggling a bit physically as well, probably to do with the season change, even though the weather doesn't seem to know what it wants to be at the moment. Yeah, I've got friends going through shit, or still going through shit. Had some losses recently of people I gave a shit about. It's been difficult, and I just don't have the bandwidth or the resources to help people who are in trouble at the moment, which is distressing to me, because I always feel that, like, at least I can help, and I can't at the moment. So yeah, depressing and annoying. So please look after each other. People in this sort of general vicinity of the hobby look down on the term community, but community has many different meanings. There may be many communities within the role-playing community, but I hope if you hang out here, you're in a more sort of not forgiving exactly, but understanding and generous mindset that I try to practice, and I hope it's rubbed off on you. Yes, I hope I rubbed off on you. I also have a medical checkup coming soon, which is very stressful because it impacts my financial assistance for disability and mental health and all kinds of other things. And the most recent feedback is that the swelling and pain that I suffer isn't so much necessarily to do with the blood pressure medication, but I might have neuropathy in my extremities, so we plan to check that out. At least it's free. But yeah, if my hands start to go, that is potentially extremely stressful. But I've only had a couple of very short bouts of hand pain, but you can imagine how that might make writing difficult. I'm about to be 50. 5th of next month. That doesn't help either. I think I've delayed the worst excesses of my midlife crisis up until 50, but yeah, it's one of those milestone ages. I didn't freak out so much about being 40 for whatever reason, but 50 feels different. Honestly, I never thought I'd get here, even before all the medical and mental health issues. I thought something cool but deadly would happen to me, but it never did. That's what comes with having a sedentary hobby and lifestyle, I suppose. Tonight we should be back playing Thirst of Strahd on Tabletopless, so if you like to mix your dice rattling with your booby rattling, then come see us. criticalhole.com should have the links there. And also, of course, I have to keep plugging motsp.com, which has some more material up, and we'll have some more material up probably within the next week, following along with the game streams we've been doing over on Grim Streams. So on we go then, onto the comments. Warning, some of these comments are a bit long, but that's because they were good comments and they said stuff that I found interesting. So, be warned. On the Christian nationalism video, Brian Gregory says, some background on how this ball started rolling here in the States. During Kennedy's 1960 presidential campaign, many news outlets spewed rabid anti-Catholic bigotry to try and prevent him from being elected. When JFK won anyway, the news organizations did some soul-searching and decided that, going forward, the subject of a political candidate's religion would be off-limits. At some point in the 1980s, it occurred to the Republicans that they could disingenuously claim to be a better Christian than their opponents, and the media would essentially be forbidden from pushing back with examples of that candidate's conduct that directly contradicted their claims of religious superiority. Coupled with this, the rise of the super-rich televangelists like Pat Robinson, Jerry Falwell, James Dobson, and Joel Osteen, whose number one issue was not paying taxes. Thus, they would give any Republican candidate, no matter how odious their rubber stamp endorsement, since Republican politicians are required to sign a pledge vowing never to raise taxes, no matter how much it might be necessary. This 1-2 punch has given rise to the US's current wave of rabid pseudo-Christianity, which, I kid you not, renounces Christ's Sermon on the Mount as woke propaganda. Yeah, I've seen that attitude present. The hypocrisy doesn't fuel my atheism, necessarily, but it does kind of demonstrate that it doesn't really mean anything to anybody. It shows the hypocrisy, and it demonstrates that this isn't some kind of magic bullet to make you a better, nicer person, to improve your life or whatever. And most of the best people I know are absolutely, fundamentally not Christian. The Catholicism thing is interesting because my viewpoint of modern Catholicism in the US is that it is extremely conservative, not associated with a more liberal side of things. Even Biden's Catholicism seems to have been far too conservative compared to what the moment really demanded, and a lot of the far right seem to be congregating, if you'll pardon the pun, around Catholicism, which is a bit weird, I guess. Or maybe not that weird. After all, they did cuddle up to the Nazis and Mussolini and so on, so despite earlier conflict, so maybe it's not that weird. I don't know. I think that Catholicism has that much stricter hierarchy thing going on. It is itself authoritarian, which is perhaps why it appeals to these strands in culture. Plixie Nixie says, sadly, I don't think there's going to be anything stopping the religious revival because atheists already blew their load in the last 2 decades with 2 major problems. One, most of what people consider as atheists in charge, your elite NGO, financial, globalist types, either operate on the Masonic or Gnostic or Deist faith ideals, or they're Christian and Muslim in how they operate. Atheists just don't breed in significant numbers for their ideals to take hold when economic systems implode, nor do they collectivize historically in significant numbers, or are philanthropic enough to have their philosophies survive maybe more than 1 generation after a peak period of wealth. Even the neo-pagans like Varg Vikernes have more children than you and will outlast you. Thus, atheism of the Reddit and 21st century variety will not thrive nor survive the turbulent times ahead. So there's really no stopping the bulldozer of a variety of faith revivals in the 21st century, because for all of the smarts atheists are supposed to have, not having solid bloodlines to spread the faith doesn't seem to be one of them. Judaism survived, despite not being particularly evangelical, nor particularly fecund. Right, so there are other things here. This post contains several red flags to me, so I'm not sure how serious you're being. But you don't need to breed if you can deprogram people, and it's not like genetics carries faith. even in extremely repressive religious authoritarian regimes, not everyone remains a member of that faith or that splinter of the faith. In more liberal countries, even more so, people tend to stray and think and have the space to come to their own conclusions, right? So this idea of breeding as if faith is genetic rather than mimetic is just bizarre to me. And ultimately, as I said in the video, all of these religious beliefs eventually cannot stand because they are not based upon anything solid. It's nonsense all the way down, and eventually one of those nonsense Jenga bricks gets pulled away and the whole thing collapses. So yeah, we might be in for dark times, but the idea that you can just breed more atheists is nonsense on its face. I mean, you can look at it like the difference between West and East Germany, right? East Germany, very dour, though it was one of the most successful, quote, communist, unquote, nations that there were in the old Warsaw Pact. And the West, meanwhile, was a lot more liberated, had cool shit, lived a freer life. You know, I think you underestimate the appeal of a lifestyle that isn't constantly grounded in guilt and nonsense and rote ritual. I think just having a more joyful existence as a non-believer has a great deal of appeal. Alright, on 3 Flavors of Cthulhu. Christian Mertz says, have you used the Chaosium Pulp Cthulhu? Why no mention about that? Much less squishy and more two-fisted action, but with the BRP chassis. I mean, as I predicted, lots of you were going to be upset that I didn't mention your particular favourite form of Cthulhu, and lo, it came to pass. I couldn't cover everything. I wasn't going to cover everything, so I went for the 3 biggest contenders in the current context. So that's why I didn't cover these other things. Plus, I don't own everything, despite frequent appearances to the contrary. Mike Necrophant says, I played a lot of Trail of Cthulhu back in the day because I thought it was a bit easier to handle rules-wise than Call of Cthulhu's BRP-based system. I've sold my Trail books, but have kept my COC ones because I'm a fan regardless. Both games make me feel like I'm doing my taxes when I look at my character sheet. Ever since I really got into the OSR a number of years ago, I haven't had much patience for anything I think seems convoluted or has too many numbers. Considering how much character death is a given in Call of Cthulhu, I'm surprised Chaosium hasn't tried to put out a rules-light version. I think Call of Cthulhu's supposed complexity is overstated, and it's just because you have a lot of potential skills and because it's D100, but it's actually incredibly simple, and the character sheet already has everything you need on it, really. You don't have to write the whole thing out every time. And a lot of people go too far the other way in terms of simplicity, which doesn't suit every game. I don't tend to think that the OSR type stuff is really suited to this kind of game necessarily, at least not without so much house ruling. You're essentially playing an entirely different game. Of course, your mileage may vary, but I don't think it's as complicated as you're making it sound. Trail is fiddly because you're having to keep track of all your different pools. That's the problem with that one, and a bit of a problem with Cypher as well, constantly keeping track and note keeping rather than just referring to your sheet occasionally when you need it. So yeah. Ned Leeds says, great breakdown, left out the much beloved Call of Cthulhu D20 and Acton Cthulhu. You move in very different circles to me. While Call of Cthulhu was praised as being one of the best D20 conversions of a game out there, that's a bit like crowning the prettiest turd. Yeah, the circles I move in did not particularly rate it, even though they figured it was one of the better D20 conversions. And Acton Cthulhu, I flipped through it, but I haven't read it, and it's not a major contender, I don't think. Paul Berry says, what other classic genre author, besides Lovecraft, deserves the TTRPG treatment? I'd love to see Clark Ashton Smith or Ray Bradbury's works adapted. I don't know that Bradbury would work necessarily. Asimov's Robot series might, but I think it'd be difficult to find a hook there. I would say E. Doc Smith's Lensman. Now, technically, there was a GURPS book for that, but I don't think GURPS counts. So let's coin a new internet rule. Rule 51. There's a GURPS source book for it, but it doesn't count. No exceptions. Lord Dunsany, perhaps. I vaguely recall someone doing an RPG project based upon his work, but perhaps he's got limited appeal. The Wizard of Oz is overdue. There's been a few sort of spins and suggestions and kinda, sortas, but nothing complete, really. People forget that the world of the Wizard of Oz is the Wizard of Oz and over 13 sequels and some related works that exist within the greater expanded Oz universe. So converting it faithfully, properly, and completely into a game would be quite the effort. Maybe Arthur Macon or Macon, yeah. Algernon Blackwood's John Silence, perhaps. William Hope Hodgson has had some spotty coverage and a couple of games. The Sargasso Sea game that I reviewed a while back, and Forgotten Futures did a sort of tap into Karnaki, the Ghost Finder, but I think Hodgson deserves a lot more. M.R. James, perhaps. That's if we're limiting ourselves to public domain ones, which frees you from the burden of licensing, or at least should. Barsoom, Tarzan, I'm looking at you. On the Street GMing video, Gary Farash says, do you have a more extended treatment of this, or a book about this, or something? After decades of GMing, I still struggle with improvising coherent and interesting non-pre-written materials. Given a campaign or scenario, I can run that well and improv around that. Doing my own thing often involves a lot of frustrating prep, and even that doesn't help much at the table, as I can't think of anything interesting to improv. E.g. players say they do X, so they do X. I have started and discarded several books of GM advice. The more persistent ones have been in the mode of street GMing, so maybe I will try again. I end up feeling like I can't say anything new or particularly useful. Rather, I can just synthesize and bring together a sort of syncretic GM manual based on other people's advice and a handful of things that are my own sort of tips and tricks that I think work really well. So it feels like heavily trod ground with not that big an audience over which there is a lot of competition. But maybe I'll give it another try. I don't know. Mike Necrophant says, do you wear the sunglasses when you DM? Generally speaking, I do not. I do wear them when LARPing, or used to when I LARPed. I wear them in my videos, partially because it looks cool, but mostly because I'm a little bit light sensitive, and the studio lights frequently give me a headache if I don't wear the dark glasses. On the Antifa or Anti-Fascist video, Akish says, what was that quote a couple of months ago now? They don't kill you because you're a Nazi, they call you a Nazi so they can kill you. That word specifically gets thrown around too casually, as does fascist, of course. I might even argue that communist gets thrown around too liberally, although it does apply to some problems these days. I would politely disagree. But no, the vast majority of people in Antifa don't actually know fascism because they've never actually experienced or seen it. They wouldn't get to exist in a country that was fascist. Oh, they would. For a while. Until they wouldn't. And that's how that works. Yeah, throwing around Nazi is incorrect. that was very much a thing of its time and place. There are a handful of people who would still call themselves Nazis, I suppose. But fascist, when it's applicable, should be used. The trouble is the overuse in the past has made its current entirely applicable and justifiable use ring hollow. Communist does still get thrown around far too liberally when people don't know what a communist is or a socialist is, or the difference between Marxist and non-Marxist socialists. I mean, just look at the over-the-top reaction to Mamdani, right? That's absurd. Meanwhile, the reaction to Trump has not been absurd. It is, in fact, if anything, a bit too muted, I would say. Anyway, moving on. On the top 5 introductory games, Just a Tall Guy says, sure you're not OSR, 80s music, 80s look, 80s books, my musical taste ranges incredibly widely, but mostly from the 70s onward. My look is, I would say, more 90s than 80s. I have a sort of goth industrial Rob Zombie on the cheap look going. I chose those books because they had a proven track record, which is going to bias it towards older games, certainly. But I also think that there is a certain amount of virtue in those games, much like there is a virtue in old console games, in that they had to work, right, when you didn't necessarily have access to a lot of other resources. So the books had to be complete and well explained, on the theory that you wouldn't have anyone else to explain these things to you, or access to web-based errata, or whatever else, right? So that's why I think the older games tend to be better introductory games. But there may be some old-fashioned assumptions involved there. PE003 says, thanks for that. Would be really interested in your thoughts on Ubiquity system. I keep trying it, but I don't like it, and I can't figure out why. I think the problem with the Ubiquity system to me is it is neither fish nor fowl. It's neither massively simplified to the point where you're kind of rolling to resolve scenes, and nor is it crunchy enough to be satisfying to people who want crunch. So it sits kind of awkwardly in the middle. I also think that it has some similar problems to the NWOD rules. When NWOD started, they brought out a core book that was just the rules, and then they were going to bring out all the supplements that would do, each of the different races with a new spin on them. Very few of which landed for me. Massive disappointment. But the rules themselves were a disappointment to me. The best example I can give is how it rolled to hit and damage and everything all into the same roll. And so the system lost fidelity and lost differentiation between a quick, easy to use but low damage weapon like a switchblade, and a big, heavy, difficult to use but devastating when you hit weapon like an axe. And so it didn't reflect what you were doing with what the outcome was. And I think that's the problem I have with Ubiquity. On the music, Delve Loop Level Loop, which of course was an homage to Eat Sleep Rave Repeat. Smiler with a Gun says, this is a bona fide banger and deserves to go viral. Well done, good sir. It's AI. I write the lyrics and the structure, and I refine the prompts, but I am no musician. Maybe a lyricist, but not a musician. No, I shouldn't talk about that. Kev O'Reilly says, too much talent in those ring-adorned fingers of yours. Again, no talent whatsoever, other than learning how to prompt Suno and then generating tens of versions of a track and winnowing it down and evolving it into something that I think is good enough. But it's, other than the lyrics, it's not talent at all. I do handwrite the lyrics, and you can also put certain instructions and things in the lyrics when you feed them into the AI. But otherwise, no. I have no musical talent whatsoever. I can't play any instruments. I don't have the patience to learn how to play an instrument. So, yeah. Spare me your praise. It is unearned. And yeah, again, yeah, that's... no, I'm not going to say anything. Alright. Big Trouble in Little China video. Kev O'Reilly says, Grim, this you should do. A game that runs the gamut of John Wick to Indiana Jones through to Constantine across global mythology. Honestly, I can't think of anyone better to spin this up. Alright, here's a free idea. You have a loose association of people who track down and deal with mythological leftovers. And everyone's a wanderer, truck drivers, long-haul bus drivers, specialist couriers, bush pilots, salesmen, travelling salesmen, carnies, journalists, photographers, bounty hunters, private detectives, smugglers, musicians, hobos, and van life bloggers, right? All people who can up sticks and move at a moment's notice, travelling around the country or even the world to deal with weird leftovers from different mythologies. So there's an idea for you. I will probably never get around to it, but if anyone wants to run games on that basis, there's a start point. On the Jewish porn conspiracy, Chad says, found the Jew. So I just want to take a moment, because part of my concern about the religious revival and Christian nationalism thing is a lot of people's irrational hatred seems to be being directed against pornography, when pornography correlates with a steep decline in sexual assault and other similar issues. So I just want to point out that this kind of abjectly and overtly racist fuckstick is who you're aligning yourself with if you decide to persecute adult entertainers. This kind of person, terrified of sexuality, particularly female or gay or trans sexuality, and so utterly fucked in the head that they think because there's one Jew on the board of an investment group, which as one of its many investments has stock in MindGeek, that qualifies it to be a Jewish controlled psyop. That's your fellow traveller. Just leave people the fuck alone to have fun. Is that so hard? Zang. It's been called misogynistic, racist, a hate group, reactionary. It's been blamed for Trump, for keeping women out of games and technology. None of this is true. If you want the real story, then you need to buy Inside Gamergate.